Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing a top 10. Topic of this top 10, as you could guess by the thumbnail, Multiverse Variants. And this is influenced by the Deadpool movie that's coming out at the time I'm recording this, Deadpool and Wolverine. It's come out yesterday at the time I'm recording. I am going to see it tomorrow, so I don't know any of the spoilers. Or there are some that I have been spoiled, but I don't know the overall premise. So it got me thinking, it ties highly into the multiverse aspect of Marvel. What are some multiverse wrestlers? So basically what this is wrestlers in a gimmick that they're not necessarily most famous for. So for example, here's someone that's not on the list, and I didn't consider him for this because I think he's famous in both, but you'll get the idea. Steve Austin as both Stone Cold Steve Austin and Stunning Steve Austin, or Owen Hart as the Blue Blazer and Owen Hart. Obviously the Owen Hart version is the more famous, even though we all know the Blue Blazer because of the accident. So as you can see, these are wrestlers that were more famous in a different version of themselves or a different gimmick, but I also like their other gimmick, if that makes sense. So they're multiverse variants of the wrestlers I like. Coming in at number 10, Golga. Golga you probably know better as Earthquake or John Tenta, or maybe even the Shark in WCW or Avalanche in WCW. And a lot of people did not like Golga. Even on his dark side of the ring, it was looked at unfavorably, but I enjoyed the oddities. I thought the oddities were a nice comedy gimmick. At no point did I think Golga was going to challenge for the World Championship, but that's not what they were there for. They were there to make you get up and dance and laugh, and I liked the fact that they were tied with ICP. I liked the gimmick. I liked the fact that he was obsessed with Eric Cartman, which at the time was very new. South Park was still very new and very much in the zeitgeist. So yeah, I like Golga. I love Earthquake, so it was easy for me to love this version. Going from that, our number 9, Aaron Rex in TNA, most famously known as Damian Sandow, and he has had a successful run in the NWA as Aaron Rex with a slightly different gimmick, or a kind of drastically different gimmick than the Aaron Rex of TNA. This is one of those gimmicks that you either love or you hate. He played somewhat of a Liberace character, and if I remember right, the HBO Liberace movie came out right around the same time, and it didn't get much of a chance, and the fans, to be honest, it wasn't popular with the fans, but I think there was something there. And with someone as talented as Aaron Rex, aka Sandow, is, I think there was room for this to be something special if it would have got its shot. I enjoyed it. That's why it's on my list here. Now, our number 8, Smooth Sailing Ashley Remington, aka the Party Peacock Dalton Castle. And I want you to look at something. Do you see this picture here? If you're not familiar with Ashley Remington, but you know who Dalton Castle, take a look at this picture. Just take a few moments, soak it in, because I want to tell you a little bit of a story. Ashley Remington is someone I liked from watching Chikara, and I believe he had a few appearances in Ring of Honor, and I loved the character. Fast forward a little bit, Dalton Castle debuts, and I'm talking to my friend Laura, and she mentions how Dalton Castle used to be Ashley Remington, and for the life of me, I did not believe it. I never noticed until she said it. That's how good of a character both versions of Dalton Castle are, and it is obvious when you watch it now, and you know it ahead of time, and it was probably obvious and I was just being oblivious to the fact, but here he is, Ashley Remington, which was a very interesting gimmick to say the least. If you could track down some of the old Chikara videos with him on there, he's highly entertaining. I mean, you know Dalton Castle, you know he's highly entertaining, so it makes sense that this version of him was entertaining as well. There is that funny story where I couldn't figure out that it was the same gimmick. And as you can see, some of these have a more comic aspect than their more popular character does, which is why maybe some of them didn't get as big of a push as the other. But I really liked this. I thought it was awesome. That's why it's on here. Going from that, our number 7, Curry Man, aka Christopher Daniels. And this is one pretty much anyone that watched TNA at the time that Christopher Daniels and Curry Man were both there know fairly well. They didn't hide the fact that it was the same guy. It was kind of akin to the Mick Foley, Dude Love, Cactus Jack, Mankind thing. And Curry Man was very popular in New Japan in their juniors division, very popular in TNA. I absolutely loved the Curryman gimmick. It was a very stark contrast to the way that Christopher Daniels had been portrayed before that. He had always been a serious character up until that point, and to see him embrace his goofiness, it made it a fun character for me. Hence why it's on my list, hence why it's right here. Now going from that, our number 6, Mean Mark Callis. Now, some of you may think of this as revisionist history. Of course, The Undertaker is going to make this list. But at the time, I didn't know his character from World Class Championship Wrestling, or I may have seen it and it just went out of my mind because he wasn't much of anything there as Texas Red or Booger Red or whatever he was called. And I somewhat knew the Master of Pain gimmick. Where I really liked Mean Mark is he came into WCW as basically Sid Vicious's replacement in the Skyscrapers. And the Skyscrapers was a team I really loved. I was a huge Sid Vicious fan. So automatically, him coming in and being just as big and just as dominant as Sid made me like him as well. And then when he split off on his own, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was an awesome character. No matter what Ole Anderson says about it not being able to sell any tickets or merchandise, I thought there was something there. I mean, it's obvious. You could definitely see the guy. This is going to be the future Undertaker, so yeah. For those that watched it back in the day, you probably seen a little bit of the flashes there, kind of like the natural Dustin Rhodes. You've seen the flashes of what it would be, but at this point he wasn't fully where he would be, but there was something special there. I really like the Mean Mark character. Now going from that, our number 5. Going back to the world of Chikara, Fire Ant, aka Orange Cassidy. If you watch Chikara for any length of time, you know that Fire Ant is one of their most enduring characters, one of their biggest superstars, if you could call it that. One of the guys that really made Chikara special. And I loved the Colony, I loved Fire Ant, I loved Green Ant, Soldier Ant, all the other ants that came in, Pink Ant. Trying to remember some of the others. There were so many. But Fire Ant was the guy that stood out the most. And a lot like Ashley Remington and Dalton Castle, and a lot of this has to do with the fact he wore a mask. If you look at the two guys, as Orange Cassidy and as Fire Ant, you probably wouldn't ever notice that they're the same person if you didn't know, because they wrestle so differently. I like the Fire Ant. I hope at some point, maybe on a Halloween special or a match where Orange Cassidy gets suspended or something to that effect, Fire Ant gets to make some AEW appearances. I think that would be absolutely awesome. Going from Fire Ant to our number 4, Earl Robert Eaton. Mostly known as one half of the Midnight Express, one of the greatest tag teams of all time. Beautiful Bobby Eaton, famously from Alabama and very much has an Alabama accent. He's recruited by Lord Steven Regal, aka William Regal, into the Blue Bloods because he's related to a lord. So he's bestowed upon him a lordship role. And to me, I've said this before, that era of WCW, right before the NWO, a lot of people look at it as a downtime, but I think there's a lot of great stuff there. The Blue Bloods are one of those things. Seeing Earl Robert and him learning to be proper and posh, it's just great. And him playing off of Regal, them two being a great tag team, this was fantastic. I loved it. Obviously, everybody's going to remember him for his Midnight Express run, which you absolutely should, because the Midnight Express are top 5 tag team of all time. But this was a really cool role. I really enjoyed it. And going from that, our number 3, Scotty Flamingo, aka Scotty the Body, also known as Raven. You can't get much different of a character than Raven and Scotty Flamingo. Scotty Flamingo was your arrogant, rich, spoiled, pretty boy character that had everything handed to him. The antithesis of Raven, who was basically grunge music come to life. He was brooding, he was nihilistic, he was, dare I say, depressed, maniacal, a cult leader. Everything you want to say about the greatness of the Raven character, which is one of my favorite characters of all time. Scotty Flamingo was really awesome too, though. I loved what he did here, and it may be the same gimmick that a bunch of other wrestlers had. This is not that different than what Jim Cornette did as a manager, or any of the other cowardly heels of that time frame. It was a really fun gimmick. I do get the fact that it needed to be evolved, because because wrestling evolved from that. But I like this. I love the Raven character much, much more, trust me. But this was really awesome in itself. Going from that, our number 2, a guy that actually worked with Scotty Flamingo and were in a quasi-faction with him, Vinny Vegas, also known as Kevin Nash, aka Diesel. This was one that I really enjoyed, but I almost didn't put on the list because the Vinny Vegas character has a lot of Kevin Nash in it. However, if you go back, it also draws a lot from the mobster movies, especially My Cousin Vinny. There's a Steve Martin one, I think it's called My Blue Heaven, that it really draws on, that it's very similar to his character here. Almost like Scott Hall's Razor Ramon is Scarface. He feels like he is the Steve Martin character from, I want to say it's My Blue Heaven. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But you can see where it's very similar how he plays it. But there's a lot of Kevin Nash's personality here as well. So it's a lot similar to what he eventually would be. Now, the reason I really kept it in is because it is a little bit different to Diesel. Diesel was portrayed as a blue-collar, hard-working man. And Vinny Vegas was Vinny Vegas, a guy from Vegas. He worked with Diamond Dallas Page. He worked with the Diamond Stud, aka Scott Hall. He worked with Scotty Flamingo in that kind of a grouping. So this was just a really fun one. I do think if given time, Kevin Nash would have evolved Vinny Vegas and made it into a main event character, much like DDP did with his own gimmick. It may be for the best that he went away, became Diesel, and then became Kevin Nash. The rest is history. Now, before we get to our number 1, we do a thing here on our top 10s called the best of the rest. Basically, these are things that were considered for the list but didn't quite make it. First up, James Gibson, aka Jamie Noble. And the reason this didn't make the list, but I considered it, is the character's the same. The only difference between Jamie Noble and James Gibson, which James Gibson was Jamie Noble in Ring of Honor, he became a very short-lived Ring of Honor champion. He was only there for a few months, which is another reason why he didn't make it. However, they took the silliness away from James Gibson. Unlike a lot of these other gimmicks where it's a sillier version of someone, this was a more serious version. And I wish that WWE gave him a run as this version of Jamie Noble or James Gibson, because this was awesome. Fans of Ring of Honor for the time will look upon that fondly. That's why I considered it. Unfortunately, the shortness of it and basically that the character wasn't that much different is the reason it didn't make the top 10. Now, last but not least on the best of the rest, Hole-in-One Barry Darsow, aka Demolition Smash, aka the Repo Man, aka Crusher Khrushchev, which he had 3 successful gimmicks, and you may forget this one. He also, during this time, was called Payne Stewart, but he changed that because the actual golfer Stuart Payne passed away, or it might be the opposite way. I might be saying it backwards. So he just went by Barry Darsow, and you may forget this because this wasn't on Nitro, this wasn't on Thunder. This was on WCW Saturday Night, or in Main Event, their Saturday and Sunday shows. But this was one of those things that, in the height of the NWO, in the height of the Monday Night Wars, in the height of wrestling getting more serious, here's a throwback to the early 90s, late 80s, just a goofy gimmick. But his commitment, much like the Repo Man, his commitment to this made it stand out. I really enjoyed it, hence why it's here. Unfortunately, it didn't quite make the top 10. Now, before I get to my number 1, if you think I put someone too high, put someone too low, left someone off the list altogether, leave it down here in the comments. And I know the one that everybody's going to say, but before I say that, smash the like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't, hit that bell right there so you can get notifications. The one that everybody's going to bring up, which isn't going to be our number 1, is El Generico. And I'm going to tell you before you comment that, El Generico and Sami Zayn are not the same people. Just going to put that out there. That's why they're not on the list. That's why they weren't considered. With that being said, my number 1 multiverse variant, Chainsaw Charlie, better known as Terry Funk. I could say so much about Terry Funk, and I've said so much on so many different videos about him, how much I love him, how much I think he is the greatest wrestler of all time, how much he means to me personally as a wrestling fan, being the guy that basically put ECW on the map with his star power. His match with Ric Flair is one of my favorite matches of all time. His different runs through the years, either teaming up with Dory Funk, wrestling in Japan, his ECW run, which was amazing for a middle-aged and crazy guy, his runs in WWF against Junkyard Dog, which I think is one of my favorite feuds of that era. I mean, he's just amazing. And here we have him coming into the WWF, putting a pair of pantyhose over his head with baby powder, and cutting himself out of a box with a chainsaw, and looking like a logger, and he's just Terry Funk. I mean, he played into the whole thing where Cactus Jack had different personalities, or Mick Foley, who at the time was mostly going as Cactus Jack, especially when they teamed together. And this is one of those things that I appreciated more as time has gone on than I did then, because I wanted him just to be Terry Funk. Let's be honest. He's Terry Funk. He's the legend. And I thought at times he was treated a little bit goofy here. But then when you think about it, he's wrestling with one of his best friends. He's doing an absurd gimmick that he allows himself to be crazy. And it just works. And you go back and the matches are good. And it's Terry Funk. I mean, what more can I say than it's Terry Funk? This was just an amazing time to be a wrestling fan. Chainsaw Charlie was amazing. Terry Funk is a legend of all legends, in my opinion. That's why it's number one. Once again, if you think I put something too high, too low, let me know in the comments. Let me know what your favorite multiverse variant is. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been a Heel Heat Top 10.